Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to today's second half. I hope everyone is doing well. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description below. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe and click the like button. It's fast and free. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's second half. Shall we? So, I've got an update on Victor. I spoke with Victor a couple days ago. I've not been feeling well, so I didn't really want to get into it. He is still not great. I talked to him briefly for 5 minutes. It was good to hear his voice. He's definitely not the same person he was. Very weak, very tired sounding. I did ask him in regards to some paperwork, if possible, they could send it to me. He said he's going to have his son, Scott, work on that, getting some stuff over to me so I can continue to work on what we had planned. And I just told him that I hope he feels better and, that there's a lot of people sending prayers his way. So with that, the next interesting news is the interview with Sean Atwood was this morning, and it went off without a hitch. I will upload that tomorrow. Super, super nice guy. And I hope you guys enjoy that interview tomorrow. Now, let's get into some encounters. My story with these things goes back to 1950 when my dad was born in Monroe, Wisconsin. He grew up in Avon Bottoms and went to high school at Judah. I was relayed stories by him and his siblings of the Avon Bottom swamp monster. Now, to set the record straight, this was actually a Bigfoot. This was dismissed in the mid-60s when my dad was in high school at Judah as pot-smoking hippie seeing stuff. The Avon Bottom werewolf legend came much later in 2003, a few miles from where my dad grew up. Katie Zane apparently saw 3 dogmen drinking water off the Sugar River outside of Judah, Wisconsin. She apparently took a lie detector test and passed. However, those things can be easily fooled, hence why they are not submissible in court. She was featured in an episode of Monster Quest in 2002. In the late 70s is when wolfmen were being reported in the Avon Bottom, Wisconsin area. These started getting national attention by the 1980s, hence why every werewolf movie post-1980 portrays werewolves with a snout instead of a flat-faced human with hair all over its body. Not one werewolf movie pre-1980 portrays werewolves with a snout, going all the way back to the 40s. Universal werewolf black and white horror movie. That's because Hollywood was ripping off local legends in the US and making monster movies in the 80s. Every werewolf movie of the 80s takes something from the werewolf stories of Wisconsin in the 70s. Now, things get even more strange in 1981. Not far from where I grew up, less than 30 miles, there was a shape-shifting werewolf reported by a woman in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Apparently, this was seen by 20 people. The woman claimed to see a person shapeshift into a werewolf while grabbing a handrail. I know exactly where this is. It happened in an old building where they used to run a haunted house in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. My first experience came late summer 1990-91. I lived with my parents and my older brother and my sister in southern Wisconsin in the woods in an old farmhouse. White with black shutters. Shutters were really popular back then. Our nearest neighbor was about a half a mile away. Strange things happened at that place. I remember feeling watched several times there. I haven't lived there in decades. Surrounding this farmhouse, built in the 1860s, complete with a root cellar and an exterior basement vault doors as well. The house was surrounded by deep woods, and 3 sides of it were surrounded by crops. The back part faced the heavy woods. Every few years, the farmers that owned those acres would alternate between beans and corn. This encounter happened when corn was surrounding 3 sides of that house. So that year they had planted corn. This was August 1990 or 91. By the way, I'm the youngest of all 3. My oldest brother had a room downstairs right next to the kitchen and adjacent to the dining room, porch deck, and living room. My room was upstairs with my older sister. Everything was fine until late that summer. Keep in mind, the beast of Bray Road didn't hit the news until fall of 91. So this was before that. This was a couple of hours west of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, where Bray Road runs. My brother had complained of seeing yellow eyes looking into his bedroom at night. We couldn't afford an air conditioner, so you'd open your window at night. One night, he woke up my parents upstairs screaming that there was a bear with yellow eyes tapping on the glass of his window one night. He was around 12 or 13 at the time. My parents decided it would be best to move him upstairs with me and give my sister her own room, who was 9 or 10 at the time. I was 4 or 5, I think because my sister would be hitting puberty within the next year or 2, so they thought 2 boys in the same room would work out fine, and her having her own room would have happened eventually anyway. That was not the end of what happened there. My sister had experiences for years after that, and my brother had nightmares for a long time. He would wake up in cold sweats. My mom would come and comfort him and calm him down. I was merely inches away from him in the other bed. My parents converted our walk-in closet to accommodate additional bed, but it was tight in there. The bedroom was only 11 by 14 at most. The bedroom downstairs where this happened faced the cornfield north, and the back end of the house faced the woods west. My sister never saw anything, but several times heard grunts, snorts, howls, and said that it sounded like a bear with breathing problems. One time, that really scared her, and to this day she tells me about it. My brother refuses to go there, either because he most likely forgot it, or he was too scared. Heck, it was over 30 years ago. Now for the 2010 encounter. This happened many years before any podcasts about these things. This face-to-face encounter happened late July of 2010 in the Galena territory in Illinois. At the time, I was prepping for grad school and working 2 jobs to pay. I graduated from UW-Platteville in 2009. So if you were on campus during those years, you saw me there. My 2 friends, Rob and Taylor, grew up in Benton, Wisconsin. They had their own creature called the Benton Monster. This encounter happened in the summer of 1970. Apparently, it was a Bigfoot-type creature. Their parents told me many stories of this thing, but honestly, nobody took it serious. There was also strange stuff in that area. My 2 friends had a house at one time in Boncombe, Wisconsin. Basically, Boncombe is a road that is directly north of Illinois and directly north of where I saw this thing in 2010. They had all sorts of weird stuff happen there, from UFO sightings to howls. It is a beautiful area, but definitely a little creepy. Rob and myself fished a lot and had fished the Fever River and killed the smallmouth bass so much we cleared areas out. We had to find a new fishing hole, so we went south 10 miles into Illinois, into the Galena territory. Now, of course, Rob's younger brother and his two friends wanted to go. They were in high school at the time. We were fine with that. That is, until one of them, while we were prepping our fishing poles in the trunk of Rob's car, closed the trunk. Snap! One of them pushed down the trunk, breaking the tip of all three of the fishing poles. The fishing poles are made of fiberglass, and once they break, it's hard to fix. There goes our fishing night. I called my girlfriend up at the time, and she was having a girls' night, so we had nothing to do. But fate would have it, if somebody had mentioned we should have gone ghost hunting, we were already in Galena, Illinois, and had heard lots of strange stuff, so why not? So, here's the face-to-face. July 24th, 2010 at 11 p.m. We were going to go night fishing on the Galena River. It flows into southern Wisconsin, called the Fever River there. We fished for smallmouth, but we were lining the reels of our poles in a trunk. Someone slammed the trunk shut and broke the tips. There goes our night of fishing. We call our girlfriends. They're having a girls' night out. We decide to take our first and last trip down to Council Hill, Illinois. Apparently, there are some real haunted house called Albee House. Legend has it that a dad heard voices in the cellar and went crazy and murdered his family in the 1860s. I drove my four-door sedan. My buddy Rob rode shotgun. Tanner, Preston, and Chaz rode in the back. It took us about 45 minutes to get there from Hazel Green, Wisconsin. The time we left was about 10 p.m. We got there full moon, inky black dark. We got lost, and 10 minutes later we reached Council Hill Station. To the right runs Kelly Road, which goes directly to Albee House. Now, we drove this windy road into the woods, and at that road was a bridge. Cool. Except it had a large metal bar across it to prevent vehicles from driving back there. Damn. Well, we had to walk it. Keep in mind, Preston, Tanner, and Chaz thought that we had brought them down here to scare them, right? We had never gone there since we had gotten lost. It's about a mile walk into the deep woods to find this haunted house. Immediately, we look up at the sky and saw this weird triangular-shaped aircraft with colored lights at the bottom that flew up into the air. Next thing we noticed was the cornfields around it. Orbs. They were in there. No lie. It looked like 3 orbs the size of footballs in the cornfield. The corn reached about 7 foot in height in July. We watched these orbs for a few minutes before they disappeared. The other strange thing was that the side opposite of Kelly Road had frogs croaking, crickets, and lightning bugs. The side where the Albee House was had not one damn lightning bug, not one. And the ones on the field away from Albee House had a bunch of fireflies going crazy like we'd never seen before. We started our trek and noticed on this full moon night that it was extremely cold given late July in Wisconsin. Also, we felt out of breath and tired. Sure enough, our cell phones were dying like crazy, and our flashlights. We had to walk through a train tunnel, in which, train tracks ran through those woods. But there were these small tunnels you could go through by foot and ATV, maybe a small car. On these tunnels, of course, local teens had sprayed graffiti all over. We took this trek for a while and heard screams and howls in the area. We weren't scared at all. We heard coyotes hundreds of times. We realized we had taken the wrong fork. There are 2 train tunnels on the way to Albee House, and took the other one as we passed earlier. On the way, I saw some rabbits and other animals running away from the house. This is a small trail, gravel road. We are walking it at about 11 p.m. The last 150 yards, we felt like we were being watched, as to our left was a huge thicket that, no question, had this thing in it. On the bridge, which you can see, had some chalk drawings of the following: pentagrams, people turning into animals. I'm telling you, this is no BS. To get a better look at the Albee house, we scaled a 45-degree angled gravel embankment to get on top of the train tracks. So we were standing on the bridge/train tracks, and nothing strange had happened for a few minutes. So I decided to head left across the bridge to see where it went. The other 4 guys stayed on the train tracks and were admiring the house and the clear night. I walked a good 100 yards when I spotted something. At first, it was a shadowy figure hovering around a train light that was in the distance. Then, that shadowy figure passed the light and blocked it out for a few seconds. Of course, I was not scared at this point, so I slowly take 10 more steps, and then I saw it. It was crouched on the right of the train tracks in the embankment. Then it stood up. I heard what sounded like someone snapping their knuckles over a microphone. And then it stood into the light. I saw it. It was between 6 and 7 feet tall, gray in color. It was the first thing I noticed. Then I noticed wide shoulders, overdeveloped deltoids, a large patch of fur that was thicker around its neck by a few inches, somewhere between a lion's mane and the fur that was all over the rest of its body. Then I saw its head. It looked just like a wolf. Not out of proportion, glowing white eyes. I saw what would have been its left side of its body. That side was in the train light. The arms were extending long. The length of the deltoid to the elbow was extra short, while the forearms were freakishly long. Huge hands that looked witchy with extra digits, black talon claws. The legs had well-defined quads. The bottom half of the legs are hocked like a dog. Did not see a tail. Its face was the scariest. It had a small brow ridge, bright, glowing white eyes, teeth that hung out at the sides. I didn't notice a smell. It took 3 steps, then immediately went into a trot. When it was running, it was slightly hunched over, almost like you'd run at football on defense to tackle them, and you are leaning forward. It didn't pump its arms. In fact, they were almost dangling and were longer than the bottom legs. The hands were limp. I froze. I knew I had to get out of here. I screamed, "Run!" I took off toward the other girls, who by then had all taken off as well. They knew something was up. I ran and went off to the right and took mad trouble down that embankment into the bush. Tanner followed me while the other 3 did the smart things and hauled back to the train tracks. I was glad because I was thinking of anybody but my own self. I took off and Tanner was 100 yards behind me in a matter of seconds. All I remember was hearing my own heartbeat in my ears and my breath. I hit the train tunnel and immediately stopped as, out of nowhere, a light showed up. WTF. The only thing that could be there was a 4-wheeler. I heard Tanner stomping back and told him, "Shut up. Jump in the bush. Someone's here." Well, the light got within feet of the tunnel and stopped. No voice, no motor, nothing. I waited 15 to 20 seconds and went through the tunnel and looked to where the light was coming from. 300 yards, nothing. What? There was nothing there. Was it one of those orbs we saw in the cornfield? Tanner and I really hauled it back to where we heard the screams and cries of Preston and Chase. Rob looked rather chalky white. Chase was the youngest and smallest of the group and was, I don't know, like catatonic. He was so freaked out that he was mumbling to himself werewolf over and over again, and had this really freaked out look on his face that honestly really freaked me out at the time. We ran and ducked the bars of the bridge and went into the car and hauled it out of there. All of us were screaming and crying. Well, I was the only one shaking hands trying to steer my Ford Focus out of there. We never ever went back to that place, and I will never go back there again, especially at night. All right, guys, like I said in the title, update on Victor and a terrifying Dogman encounter from Wisconsin. And my throat is slowly starting to get better. I am taking people's advice. I'm drinking hot tea with honey, and I am really trying to relax. So with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in for today's second half. I hope everyone is doing well, and I cannot wait to share tomorrow's upload with you all. Until then, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.